question and answer session is obviously ask questions, and Will is here with expert knowledge to talk about the death penalty. I suppose and there's people here as well. Is there any death penalty questions you want to ask? There's plenty of us to ask here. But first of all, I'd like to ask Will, what is the current status? 2008 that was moved, is that right? We're now 2011. So could you give us an update on this case, please? Thank you.
First of all, thank you guys again. Thank you for sitting through it, and sorry that you have to hear more of my voice. Basically, where we're at the moment is, as it says at the end of the film there, we lost that appeal that was the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is sort of it's a Pennsylvania appeals circuit. So they lost that appeal. How they lost that, I don't know. And one of the judges, it's a political process basically, so you've got two Republican appointed judges and one Democrat. The Democrat abstained and wrote a scathing letter about the entire process and said that it was obvious that there were issues with this case. That then went up to the Supreme Court, which is, you know, a nationwide thing. So the Supreme Court was Mumia's last chance really of a new trial. And the Supreme Court hears about 5% of cases, usually cases that are, you know, will set a precedent in some way. And they just refuse to hear it. They don't give any reason as to why they have or why they've not. It just comes out as a list of cases that they have turned down or cases that they have taken. What happens then is it jumped back to the Third Circuit, and then it went through to appealing on another round of things. So as we said at the beginning of the film, in 2001, Mumia was officially taken off of death row in a sense. His death sentence was commuted to life in prison. The state appealed, which effectively left him on death row. Although he didn't have an execution date hanging over him, he was still sitting on the row, which is, you know, 23 hours a day isolation. You get an hour out a day in a concrete yard on your own, and then nothing on the weekends. So he's been there all of this time. He's still there today. But it went back down to the Third Circuit, and they've upheld that. So that is a slight win for us, in the sense that the DA have now taken that to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court doesn't hear that, or they side with the original judgment, Mumia will be taken off of death row and he will not be executed. So that only happened last week. I don't know when the Supreme Court, these things take about a year for them to make any sort of decision. I mean, obviously what we wanted was a fair trial, which it doesn't look like we'll get. But at least if that is upheld, then Mumia will go into general population. He will be around other people. He will be able to have. He'll be able to have contact visits. He'll be able to hold his grandchildren. He'll be able to do all of those things. So that is a slight win. And you know, we'll see. I mean, hopefully, I'd really like to hear if they run out of options. I'd like them to come forward and tell their side of the story. Obviously, Mumia knows more than is currently out there. He's been sort of saving his testimony for a fair trial. The same with his brother, and at least I would like to at least see them sort of trial it in the court of public opinion. That's kind of where we're at.
Another question on the time in the moment, but during the filming of the whole story, did anything surprise you or shock you? I think the inherent racism shocked me actually. Anything else, or was that the main thing that really shocked?
I think the thing that shocked me most was, I mean, the sort of feeling towards the case in Philadelphia was, I mean, it's a big case. It's probably America's sort of largest death row case in terms of coverage. And in Philadelphia, they're kind of not bored of hearing about it, but they're kind of, oh, we don't want to know. And when the film went to Sundance Film Festival, the Philadelphia journalist came along and he did a big interview with me and Mark and said, you know, my editor didn't even want me to do this. We don't want to cover this. There's one film in the festival that we don't really want to talk about. And outside of that, I mean, obviously the most shocking thing still to me is the move bombing. I mean, I knew of it, you know, and obviously I'd done a lot of research into it before we went, and I knew of the story. But to see the footage, we found those pictures of the bodies in, you know, the Temple University archives halfway through filming, and seeing the footage. I mean, that really is shocking to think that could happen in front of the you know, cameras and the glaring eye of the public, that they would have, you know, the balls, let's say, to do that. It's quite shocking.
Right, who'd like to open up the questions? Will's here for 20 minutes or so. You must have to make the most of him. Is there any pressing questions that you'd like to answer about the back death row?
What does Mumia himself say happened on the night that Officer Faulkner was killed?
Well, so basically what he has said is that he remembers seeing his brother being beaten by Faulkner. He remembers running across the street, and he says then that it's all a bit blurry, basically, is what he said before, and that he remembers getting shot, but he says he never shot Faulkner, and he said he never even shot his gun. So, I don't know, I think it's really hard. I mean, I've spent years looking into this case, and I still have no idea what happened. You know, I think probably the most likely thing for me is either Freeman was there, well, we know Freeman was there, either he picked up a gun or had his own gun and shot Faulkner, or I think what another likely thing that could have happened is that, as you know, I mean, basically what Faulkner had already called for backup, so basically he'd already felt threatened enough to call for backup by pulling over Billy, which wouldn't have happened if there was one person in the car. So that's another indication that there was another person there. So he'd called for backup, and I think if Mumia came running across the street, he might have turned around, freaked out, and shot Mumia, which kind of would explain the trajectory of the shot through Mumia, and then maybe Mumia shot back at him. But I really don't know. And it was really hard because, you know, you've got the prosecution's case, and you can see they've got a very clear story in what they're trying to say to the jury, and they're still saying to this day. And for us, it was hard because we don't really know, we don't have our own story to put. All we can try and do is pick apart the bits that we say, well, that doesn't really make sense, your story doesn't make sense there, your story doesn't make sense there. So what we really need to do is, you know, have a fair trial and really try and build up what really happened. But obviously I don't really get a chance to do that, unfortunately. I mean, I know the film, we get a lot of accusations of being very biased in our film, because, and you know, I guess it is a biased film. We did try, you know, I wrote to Maureen Faulkner, I wrote to, you know, the FOP, we even doorstepped the FOP to try and get their side of the story. But I think what they've done now is they've kind of made a conscious decision to, sorry, my phone. They've made a conscious decision to kind of not talk about it, and then the louder Mumia supporters get, and the more, you know, vocal they get, they kind of just treat them like lunatics. They call them Mumia maniacs, and you can kind of see that in that clip from Fox News. They kind of don't engage in any way. They just kind of try to take a piss, basically. And you know, so it's very, you know, it's very hard. I would have liked to have had them in the film, but they just went up for it.
So, like, during the making of the film, what comes over to me is that actually the state can do whatever it wants to do, regardless of all the evidence and the expression from people. It's clearly a very racist city, and they have the upper hand. What's your view?
Well, I think it's, you know, I would agree. You know, I think that when you have the power, it's very easy to shape the narrative, and I think that they've done a very good job of doing that. And you know, Mumia has got a voice. You know, this the reason I really wanted to make this film in the first place, and the thing that was the real driving factor. And to be honest, when I first started making the film, I didn't even want to get into what actually happened. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't about the innocence or guilt. It was, what fascinated me was the fact that there was this guy who had been sitting in this tiny room with no access to any people for my entire life, and somehow, just by the sheer will of himself, had reached out to the world, and was having streets named after him in Paris. I was hearing about him, musicians were talking about him, and had written books and was doing journalism, and I found that absolutely fascinating. But I'm going on a tangent already. But going back to your question, I guess that's just the nature of power, and it is a very racist. I think it's less racist than it was. I think it's much more overtly racist. I think that things have kind of changed. I mean, there's still a lot of poverty, mostly in black areas. That you go around Philadelphia, it looks like a shanty town in places, and so the sort of dynamic of the racism has changed a little bit, but it's definitely still there, and there's definitely still a lot of suspicion. But I think you can't, when the powerful will always be able to hold on to power and to do what they like, basically. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't even know if MOVE would have existed now. I mean, they would have just been like terrorist organisation, shut down. That would have happened a lot quicker. Things would perhaps even worse.
I was just noticing how much of the racism isn't necessarily strictly down black-white divide, and that quite a lot of those people in positions of authority were actually black, who were supporting the status quo and the institutions. How do you read that?
Well, I think, the fact that Wilson Goode, the first black mayor, was the one who sanctioned the bombing is shocking. But I think, we met with a guy, it was actually the guy who directed Precious, when we were first trying to make this and distribute it and things like that. And he was telling me that his father was a black police officer in Philadelphia. And after the MOVE bombing, he remembers his father coming home and he felt it was the right thing to do as a police officer. And but all of his community and his own family really judged him for that. And I think that I can't explain how much that there is a fraternal aspect to the police in Philadelphia and to law and order. And I think that that's not only there, that's in lots of places. And they really protect their own. It's kind of a gang culture in a way. And I guess, you get that no matter where you are. And they, black or white, they all protect their own.
What's the distribution of the film been?
It's been tough. It's, making films, distributing them, it is really tough. I mean, it's kind of how, this film was how Bright Wide started. So Bright Wide, which, all the films that are being shown this week are shown on Bright Wide, was started because we were having such a hard time with this film. So we took it to Channel 4, we took it to the BBC, we took it everywhere, and people were like, it's not really right for us, we don't really like it, it's a bit too political, it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that. They showed it on the Sundance channel in America, which that was amazing. So it was like, and they still show it every now and then. So, every now and then I'll get an email from my mum being like, it was just changing channels and I've seen your face, And so I'm glad it's shown in America on telly. But Bright Wide kind of started to show films online, and basically you pay like £2 to view a film, because we had to sort of self-distribute our own DVDs, sell them on the website. We tried to tie in with organisations. You can still do this if anyone has any organisations that they want to raise money for, and you get your own code. So for every DVD you sell, you get like £2 towards your organisation. So we kind of tried to go build new sort of models a little bit, but it's very tough at the end. For documentaries like this, it's very often the case, is that you go off and make it, and it's very, you can make films for nothing. I mean, now that everything's gone digital, you can make a film like this with your home camera and a laptop, essentially. I mean, the graphics and music and stuff will cost you a fortune, but that's where the majority of the budget of this film had to be spent, was on things like that, clearance of music and clearance of archive. But you can go make a film and have a film, but it's getting the film seen, and that's the really tough thing. And I think that people are just now starting to find new little avenues of how to do that. Independent screenings, film clubs, showing things online. I mean, so much of it's going online now. you know, but it's tough.